CLG pick up their first win of the 2016 summer split off the back of Quas.
Oh, CLG take the Nexus and the series. Dual carries of C9 team up for a huge scoreline, 20-0-11.
TSM are undefeated, both in matches and in games.
Immortals is definitely a very strong team. You know, they had a very good regular split last season. Of course, TSM did 3-0 them in the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see how the match plays.
We're going to just win, so we don't care that much.
Welcome, League fans, to the North American LCS and this Sunday lineup of games here in Los Angeles, California. We're already a few matches into the season, but we're just getting started as the LCS teams adjust to patch 6.11. As you can see, the audience very happy to be here. Lots of energy, and Immortals making their way into the studio, having a great start to their split so far. We'll see if they can hold it together. Their opponents this morning, TSM, also having a very impressive undefeated run so far in the early portions of the split here. Seraph and the rest of Team Envy getting ready, set up for their best of 3 series today. They are going up against Phoenix 1. Gate here, as you see, supporting Slushie again today. They're still looking for their first match victory of the split. Thank you, everybody, for watching. As always, I'm James Patterson, and joining me on the analysts today is Mark Zimmerman and Marcus Dyrus Hill. Welcome back, Marcus. I'm stuck with you once again, it seems.
Yeah, but it's always a 50-50 experience. I'm like happy to talk about League of Legends, but then I have to be here with you.
Here it is.
And it's just like, if only I could talk about League with you.
You can power through.
Yeah, I'll make it.
I'm here to help you.
Yeah, Tyrus is my light in the darkness.
I like it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are still 3 undefeated teams here in the North American LCS, but at least one of those teams will lose that honor because our Game 1 pits TSM up against Immortals. So, gentlemen, talking about these two teams, TSM first, undefeated so far in the split. How do we feel about this roster?
I think they're the most dominant of the 3-0 teams. They haven't dropped a game yet, off of the fact that they're 3-0, so all their wins have been 2-0s, and they look extremely clean. Most of these games have not been close, and even if they're a little close in like 15-minute mark, they blow the game wide open and kind of stomp through.
I really thought the true test was going to be CLG, but against Immortals, maybe that'll be the true test because Immortals was already a really, really strong team, but kind of fumbled in the playoffs. So I'd like to see how they do against them in the playoff or in the real season.
Speaking of which, as we look at some clips of Immortals play, as always, Huni and Rainover getting in a lot of early game ganks, and that duo never ceases to amaze, it seems.
Yeah, they definitely ride the line between like crazy and calculated, where at any moment you think they're gonna like win the game instantly or lose it, and it's this amazing thing to watch because they're totally, play differently than anyone else.
All right, so then within this matchup, what do we think the key elements of it are? Is it going to revolve around the duo jungle top laners? Is it going to be more of a mid lane focused matchup between Bjergsen and Pobelter? Where do we see this series hinging?
I think one of the reasons why these teams are so strong is not only because of their individual play, but because of their team play. So we can't really be able to tell because they're all so very, very close. But in my opinion, probably between Double and Wild Turtle is going to be one of the things to look at.
I think that's probably one of the few mismatches you can say that Doublelift is a little bit stronger in lane. I think it's kind of draft dependent though, because we've seen now the TSM that they've gone to different places. We've seen them go mid, we've seen them go top, depending on their picks and what the other team has. So I think, it will kind of be comp dependent.
Now, and as always, Dyrus, you have a unique perspective on this matchup because being a former player for TSM, still involved with the organization, but teammate Wild Turtle now moved over to Immortals. Old rival in Doublelift now moving on to the roster. What's your take on the different individuals within this matchup?
So no matter what I'm going to say, people are going to think I'm kind of biased, but from the past, like one of the reasons why I hated CLG was because of Doublelift, and now he's on TSM, so I'm kind of forced to like him. So I'm like, whatever. Me and Turtle on TSM, like, regardless of what happened when I was on the team, like, me and him were, I don't know, I thought we were very close, and he's very hard to like not get along with. Like, he's the easiest person in the world to get along with. We have similar tastes, we play similar video games. Like, they're both very, very good players, so I don't have any
Tugging at your
negative feelings.
heartstrings, really.
Yeah,
He wants
yeah,
TSM
pretty
to
much.
win, but to double to go 0-10.
That's what he said. Getting dragged across the finish line
yeah.
by the rest of TSM.
Exactly.
I mean, I'd be happy with either one winning, but if I had to choose, like, I'd probably choose Turtle.
Okay.
But for teams, I would choose TSM.
What we want is good games above all
Yeah,
else.
of
Am
course,
I right?
yeah,
Am I
of
right?
course,
All right. Well, our
yeah.
third undefeated club, Envy, is taking on a winless Phoenix 1 today, which really tells a story about this Envy team. Because yes, they haven't lost a match yet this split. Their strength of schedule so far, however, it makes it really tough to tell whether or not this team is in the same class as TSM and Immortals.
I think a lot of people are looking at this series expecting a win out of Envy. They've shown that they are a very cohesive unit. They always seem to play the mid and late game portions extremely well. They tend to have a longer game time, and that kind of accentuates those strengths where they're always performing these late game shot calling situations. But they haven't really gone against one most people would consider top 4 teams yet. Early in the season, you might have thought so, but we've seen TL struggling, and that ended up being an easy match for them. So I think, looking forward a little bit past this weekend, we want to see how they perform against those really talented and mechanical teams that they haven't seemed to have played against yet.
And of course, something that's very intriguing to me about this Envy lineup is that most of the, if not all of the players, seem to have a relatively deep champion pool, very flexible in pick and ban. And so when it comes to identifying strengths and weaknesses of their opponents, they seem very capable of throwing very targeted bans and picking specifically against whatever lineup they're playing to.
I think the real test will be when they play against the very, very top.
Yeah, so the likes of Immortals, TSM, CLG, and Cloud9, who are their opponents over the next 2 weeks. That is an insane. You go from, maybe you're undefeated
Boys
coming
to men
after,
right there.
right?
Yeah.
So, there's still some time to determine whether or not this Envy lineup is going to make a run for that top echelon of teams. But speaking of individual contributions, last night we saw a man who got his share of early split criticism go absolutely nuts in a pretty unique pick. Quas on Alawi. I mean, it was just a ton of fun to watch above all else, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was just the kind of thing where most people haven't seen it played at a high level yet, and you start seeing it in these team situations where people are grouped up, they're getting like the test of spirit, and test of will, and then just like they don't know to get away from the vessel, and then he's killing people just being near them, and it's just crazy to watch.
Like I've said before, I think she's a very underrated and hidden OP. Because what happens is her E, the little spirit grabbing thing, when you grab someone from full HP and your team hits it, they're instantly to half.
Right.
And they have like the Q.
It's an interesting
passive.
kind of poke because your
Yeah.
entire team can become involved, right? Like, so even a champion who wouldn't normally be able to poke kind of gets to do it through Alawi.
Yeah, and I think you'll start seeing teams kind of play around that maybe where when someone's spirit gets grabbed, instead of everyone running around like, oh, what do we do now? Maybe they engage, and then they force a fight. And so you kind of are not exactly sure how Alawi's going to function in like the really high levels of play yet because we've only seen one person really break it out.
Right, exactly.
I think the biggest thing about Alawi is picking mobility around here. Because like you said, if they go in, she's getting more targets to ult. But if they run away, then they're running away with half their HP.
Right, lots of Sivers, lots of Karmas perhaps to counter the Alawi, but it's going to be very interesting to see how teams adapt to her very unique playstyle and mechanics. Now that we've got a few of our series under our belts, these types of individual contributions are starting to come forward, and we're seeing some real standout performances. And specifically, we'll look at damage per minute leaders here. Something to take note of: this entire list is mids and ADCs, barring Hanser, sitting in that number 3 slot.
Right, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, you expect 80 carries in mids, that makes sense. They're playing a lot of the highest damage champions. They farm up a lot, they never get denied the way a top laner can in the 2v1. But then you just see Hanser's there, not only on the list, but third.
Right.
It's just crazy. He's above double lift of all things, too. It's really surprising.
I mean, of course, we do have to caveat that, damage per minute is a stat that can get inflated with game time. So it's not, we can't put all of our eggs in that basket and say, well, because he's at the top of that list, he's by far and away the best top laner. But it definitely speaks to his performance so far, the split, Dyrus.
Yeah, he's a god. But besides the champions and the gameplay styles for each team, it really depends on not only the champion, but how they funnel in gold and fight around. For example, like TSM has been winning, so Bjerg and Hanser has been on top. Double probably should be up there, but maybe they play a little bit less around him. And at the same time, Hanser just plays extremely well, so he can put out all that damage. So whether you're playing like Fiora or Echo or Maokai or even a Swain, like it really, really depends how much you're fighting.
And just to touch on that quickly, I mean, the thing that's interesting is we're saying, game time might matter, champ pool might matter. Yes, Haunster's playing a lot of these kind of carry-focused things, but so are a lot of other tops, like
Right.
Huni.
Yeah,
Ray.
Huni in this matchup against him, right? If we look down the list, as you just mentioned, like Echoes, Rivens, and Aurelius
Yeah.
are the only 3 champions that Huni has
Not
played.
necessarily low damage.
No, not at all.
So that's why it's really surprising to me, is because TSM wins quick. They're not having these extended games where there's a ton of team fights and your damage kind of goes up. And he's playing, carries, but so are a lot of other people. So
Yeah, it does kind of maybe speak to then what Doublelift was saying on the desk when I had him here about how this TSM lineup, one of their focuses coming into this split was that they weren't going to be afraid to fight. They weren't going to be afraid to be more aggressive, whereas in the past we've seen a more calculated TSM kind of playing that map movement. Here they're saying we'll take those fights and we're confident in them, so the damage is coming out. Another thing to note, nowhere in that top 10 are any members of Phoenix One, Envy, Echo Fox, or Apex. The one that strikes me as the most odd there is the fact that no one on Envy is up there, an undefeated team, right? One of our top teams, so a team that's winning quite often. So how does that must speak to the fact that they are less willing to jump into a team fight. They're a more slow-paced, calculated team.
Right, I think that's kind of what we were saying, is that they make their money through these big team decisions, and they don't do them all the time. They're not Immortals rushing and they're fighting. They'll pick their spots and they'll be really decisive in them. Sphere has a great mind for engaging, and so it's very open and shut. It's close game. We win a big fight, I think, and so you don't have as many opportunities to inflate your damage numbers that way.
I think calling them a slower team might be because their lack of experience. Because if, let's say you're playing against SKT, right?
Yeah.
You give up a slight lead, they're just going to mow you down for the
Right.
rest of the game. I think it's more about the levels of these teams more than about their play. So if you give up a little, they're just going to rush through and they're going to win. But if you give up a little against the lower teams, you kind of have a little bit more room, and they're going to take it slower just so they can guarantee their victory. Not that saying that they're that much worse, but they're going to take every step necessary to win the game.
Yeah, they're cautiously moving forward, making
Yes.
sure they don't throw, and that is to be expected with younger and newer teams. Now, though, let's check out how our teams are stacked up heading into today's matches. Up at the top, we've got TSM, Immortals, and Team Envy. Alone in 4th is Cloud9, with Apex just behind them in 5th. Tied for 6th is Echo Fox and CLG. Energy Esports notched up a bit in the standings, picking up their first series win last night, giving them a lead over our 2 last-place teams in Phoenix One and Liquid. Then turning to today's matchups, we'll kick things off in the Battle Arena on NALCS 1 with TSM taking on Immortals. After that, Echo Fox will go up against Liquid. And in the Battle Theater on NALCS 2, newcomers face off with Team Envy versus Phoenix One, followed by the Old Guard, Counter Logic Gaming versus Cloud9. Now, just a reminder that we're lucky to be joined by 2 guest analysts, each with a wealth of game knowledge to drop on us here at the desk. So we'd like to invite you to send your questions to us at LOL Esports using the hashtag NALCS, and we'll be looking through your meta questions, item build puzzles, and game knowledge queries, and we'll select a couple for Mark and Dyrus to tackle on air. And while you're on Twitter, don't forget to also call out your hypest moments from today's games using the hashtag LCS Big Plays. We're looking forward to seeing all of your questions and favorite moments later in the broadcast. That's going to wrap it up at the analyst desk, so let's send it over to our casters to get our games underway.